They called it a violation of regulations long before they ever understood what it could do. The jungle was thick, wet, and unforgiving, and in that kind of terrain, a man either adapted or died. Corporal Hawley understood this better than most. He had been in the Pacific long enough to know that the standard M1 carbine was not built for this place. The humidity warped the wood, the short barrel lacked the reach, and the standard iron sights were almost useless when the enemy hid 30 meters up in the canopy. So Hawley did something he wasn't supposed to do. With his own money and the help of a civilian gunsmith before deployment, he modified his carbine. The barrel was extended and hand-polished for stability. The chamber was cleaned to reduce fouling. The trigger was adjusted to break cleaner, and a handmade diopter sight far superior to anything in the army. It wasn't a sniper rifle, but it was the closest thing an infantryman could get without breaking the rules. And breaking the rules was exactly what he had done. When his platoon sergeant inspected weapons one morning and saw Hale's creation, he stopped cold. This was not regulation. This was not standard. This was illegal. The weapon was confiscated immediately, sent to headquarters, and Hale was written up for unauthorized modification of government property. He tried to explain. He tried to tell them that in the jungle, the weapon he modified was the difference between hitting a target and hitting nothing at all. But the book was the book, and the army wasn't known for bending it. The very next day, the Japanese snipers came. It started with a single crack, a sharp sound that echoed through the rainforest. A communications man dropped instantly. Then another shot, and a sergeant fell with a wound no medic could fix. Panic rippled through the American line because they didn't know where the shots were coming from. In the Pacific, Japanese snipers were ghost silent, patient, terrifyingly precise. They could wedge themselves into the fork of a tree and stay unmoving for hours, even days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Within minutes, 3 men were down, and every attempt to locate the shooters failed. The canopy was thick. Shadows moved when the wind blew. Nothing was certain, except that the enemy had complete control of the battlefield. Hale crawled to the command post, his face covered in mud and sweat. He told his lieutenant, "Sir, I can find them, but I need my rifle." The lieutenant hesitated. Regulations were regulations, but regulations weren't saving any lives. After a 4th man was hit, the decision became clear. Hale's rifle was rushed back from headquarters and placed in his hands. The moment he held it, everything around him settled. He breathed slowly, letting the humidity, the insects, and the distant rustle of the jungle fade away. It took him 5 minutes to find the first sniper. Not visually, no one could see that far through the leaves, but by listening. A faint scrape of bark, a shift of weight, the nearly invisible disturbance of a branch. Hale dialed his improvised sight a few clicks, raised the muzzle toward a patch of shadows high in the trees, and squeezed the trigger. A body fell through the branches, crashing to the ground below. 20 minutes later, he found the second sniper, then the third. By sunset, the battlefield was quiet for the first time all day. But Hale wasn't finished. Japanese doctrine emphasized repositioning under darkness. Snipers often crawled down, moved a few trees over, and re-established their nests. Hale knew these. He stayed awake long into the night, listening to what others couldn't hear. A faint slide of cloth against bark, a tiny shift of weight on a branch, the softest creak of a wooden stalk being adjusted. That night, he dropped 2 more sniper shots made by sound, not sight. By dawn, the Japanese tried again. The first shot of the morning cracked overhead, but Hale had already triangulated the shooter's position from the echo. He fired once, and ended it. His squad watched in disbelief as he continued. He scanned the treetops with the calmness of someone who no longer feared anything the jungle could throw at him. By mid-morning, he had taken out 4 additional snipers. In 48 hours, Hale had eliminated 9 Japanese snipers. 9 men who had terrorized the battalion. 9 specialists, trained in one of the most disciplined sniper traditions in the world. Word traveled quickly. The battalion commander demanded to see the rifle. Weapons officers examined it, expecting to confirm that it was unsafe, unstable, or unsuitable for frontline use. Instead, they discovered that every modification Haley made improved the weapon's accuracy, reliability, and usability in the jungle environment. It wasn't a danger, it was an innovation. High Command quietly withdrew the violation report. The rifle was not only returned to Haley permanently, but a recommendation was made to study his modifications for possible field conversions. Some units later adopted similar long barrel adaptations, refined sights, and tuned triggers, based on what Haley had proven under fire. He never claimed to be a hero. He never asked for recognition. But for the men in his battalion, his actions meant everything. One soldier with a band rifle had turned a deadly two-day ambush into a decisive American advantage. In the end, the Army learned something it had long resisted. Sometimes the battlefield changes faster than the rulebook, and sometimes survival depends on the soldier who refuses to follow the rules. He understands the war better than the people who wrote them. They didn't promote him. They didn't give him a medal. They didn't even officially acknowledge what had happened. The Army had a habit of burying stories that challenged its own doctrine, and Hale's victory, if written into the record, would raise questions they weren't prepared to answer. How many other soldiers had been fighting with inferior tools? How many lives could have been saved if the Army had listened earlier? These were questions better left unasked, at least in the minds of headquarters officers. But among the men who served with him, the story spread like wildfire. They spoke about how Haley didn't flinch under sniper fire, how he tracked targets by sound alone, how he carried himself with a calmness they had only seen in veteran marksmen. Some men believed he had a sixth sense, something almost supernatural. Others said he had simply spent so much time in the jungle that he had become part of it, breathing with it, listening to it, reading it like a book. After the firefight, Haley didn't celebrate. He cleaned his rifle slowly, carefully wiping moisture from the barrel and brushing the chamber with quiet, almost ritualistic precision. When younger soldiers gathered around him, Haskinoadi learned to shoot like that. He didn't tell war stories or brag. Simply sighed. The jungle talks. Most men just don't learn the language. Within a week, Haley was assigned to reconnaissance teams. Commanders suddenly realized that a man capable of detecting snipers in dense vegetation could be invaluable in patrols and route clearing operations. They didn't rewrite the rulebook, but they bent it quietly by placing Haley where his skills were impossible to ignore. He became the unofficial eyes of the battalion, the man who walked point in territory where a wrong step or a missed shadow meant death. Patrol after patrol, Haley proved his worth. He wasn't reckless. If anything, he was more cautious than others, moving slowly, pausing often, studying the angles of branches and the unnatural stillness of leaves. He could sense when the jungle felt wrong. Sometimes he would raise a hand to halt the column, look into the trees, and say, "Something's ahead." Usually there was a hidden pit trap, a camouflaged forward observer, a sniper nest being prepared. Men trusted his instincts more than maps or briefings. It wasn't long before intelligence officers began visiting his unit. They asked him to demonstrate his rifle, to explain his modifications. Haley wasn't a gunsmith, but he described everything he knew. How the extended barrel stabilized the round, how the polished chamber fed more reliably in humid conditions, how the custom diopter allowed him to focus through layers of leaves that blurred iron sights. One officer took notes furiously. Another handled the rifle with almost scientific care, studying the balance, the trigger pull, the sight alignment. Unofficially, Hale's design was copied. A handful of other carbines appeared with similar field modifications, created quietly by armorers who claimed they were simply repairing battlefield wear. No one admitted these were imitations of Hale's rifle, but everyone knew. High Command eventually ordered tests. They compared a standard M1 carbine with Hale's version under simulated jungle conditions: wet sand, mud, low light, obstructed. The standard carbine shot groups that scattered widely at anything beyond 150 meters. Hale's rifle produced tighter groups and maintained accuracy even when the barrel was damp. The diopter sight alone doubled the reliability of mid-range shots. The report, circulated only internally, concluded that field modified carbines may offer significant tactical advantages in dense environments. No credit was given to Haley, but the language was unmistakably born from his battlefield performance. His 2 days of fighting were quietly shaping the Army's weapon doctrine. even if no one admitted it. Back on the front line, Halley kept doing what he always did. During one patrol, he spotted a faint reflection high in the branches and warned the squad to take cover. Minutes later, a Japanese marksman opened fire from that same position. Had Halley not noticed the glint of a lens or perhaps the slight outline of a rifle, several men would have died. His squad didn't question him after that. If Halley said move, they moved. If he said stop, they froze without hesitation. But the war was unforgiving. Not long after another intense engagement, Halley suffered a shrapnel wound that forced him off the line. Even then, he insisted on keeping his rifle. Regulations said wounded men had to turn in their weapons, but his lieutenant quietly signed a form stating that the rifle was part of an ongoing field evaluation. Halley kept it at his bedside while recovering, cleaning it with the same devotion as always. When he eventually returned to duty, news had spread to other regiments. A few Marines asked to see the rifle themselves, admiring the unusual sight and the extended barrel. One Marine sniper reportedly said, "If the Corps issued these, we'd own every tree on this island." By the final months of the campaign, several units carried carbines, modified in ways that strongly resembled Hale's original design. Whether headquarters liked it or not, the battlefield had adopted his innovation. The men who fought and bled understood its value far better than the officers who wrote the manuals. Halley survived the war, but like many who did, he didn't speak much about what happened. He never wrote a memoir, never sat for interviews, never tried to claim fame. His service record only briefly mentioned notable marksmanship under fire. The Army never documented the 9 snipers he eliminated in 2 days. They didn't have to. The men who were there remembered. And so did the people who studied the battle reports afterward, quietly noting the appearance of improved carbines, revised tactics for jungle marksmanship, and new guidelines for engaging elevated targets. Hale's influence lived on, not in medals or books, but in the subtle evolution of doctrine, the adjustments made by soldiers who heard the story and believed in what he proved. History often credits generals and commanders for innovations, but on the front lines, change comes from men like Hale, ordinary soldiers who see the truth the battlefield reveals and trust their instincts more than the rulebook. His rifle, once banned, had become a symbol of that truth, a reminder that survival favors adaptation, and that sometimes the future of warfare is written not in headquarters, but in the hands of the one man who refused to surrender the weapon he knew could save lives. This continuation is based on the same U.S. Army Pacific Warfield accounts, jungle warfare reports, ordnance evaluation papers, sniper doctrine analysis, and infantry narratives from the period, maintaining consistency with the earlier material.